Let me share with you one brief prayer request. This morning we found out that Jeannie Dodd has been taken to Northeastern Regional in Tahlequah. She has pneumonia in both lungs and is really struggling. So if you would remember Jeannie in your prayers, it would certainly be appreciated. I think Bruce and Vicki are up there with her. I don't know if you had an opportunity or chose to get up early this morning and watch the sun come up, but it was a beautiful sunrise. And as I was watching the sun come up, I was thinking about that day 2,000 years ago when those women, and I'm sure they're weeping, have gotten up early and they head for the tomb and they're going to finish preparing the body of Jesus. And they're talking among themselves and they're trying to figure out, now how are we going to get that stone rolled out of the way so that we can get to his body and finish preparing it. And they come up there and that tomb's empty. And they are witness, as Rob so beautifully pointed out, to what I believe is probably the single most important event in all of human history. When Jesus walked out of that tomb and left it empty. And this morning I want us to focus on the blessing of Jesus' resurrection. A man by the name of Gerald Collins wrote this, and I thought it was so appropriate, I wanted to share it with you. In a profound sense, Christianity without the resurrection is not simply Christianity without its final chapter. It is not Christianity at all. And that is absolutely true. That basically is a summation of exactly what the Apostle Paul writes in 1 Corinthians chapter 15. If Christ be not raised, we are of all men most pitiable. The fact of the matter is that central to our faith, at the very core of who we are, is the fact that an incredible, remarkable, supernatural thing happened when Jesus walked out of that tomb. Today, you're going to see all kinds of reactions to the resurrection. The question, did Jesus rise from the dead? The fact is, most of the world is unfortunately going to say no. You've got your rationalists who are going to say, what do you mean, raised from the dead? There are no miracles. There's no supernatural. Nothing like that could occur. So, of course, whatever happened, Jesus did not walk out of the tomb. You're going to have other religions who are going to be attacking the idea of Jesus' resurrection because they know that the underlying power to Christianity, the underlying pull of Christianity rests in a belief that Jesus was raised from the dead. So they are actively attacking the idea that Jesus came out of the tomb. You're also going to find all kinds of alternative so-called explanations that are being offered. Well, in reality, Jesus really didn't walk out of the tomb. You read, and it sounds like the writers make that literal, but in reality, it was just a figurative resurrection. He was just figuratively raised from the dead. Well, if he was just figuratively raised from the dead, what's that say for you and me? That's all that's going to happen to us too. And there's not much hope in that, is there? There's the swoon theory. Well, he just passed out on the cross. He really didn't die. And when they put him in the tomb, he awoke, and I just find this amazing, but there's a whole book on this. And somehow, this man who has gone through all he's gone through, and we're going to talk about that, is able to get up and roll the stone from the inside away from that tomb and go out of that tomb. It makes no sense at all. But there is that famous swoon theory. There is the idea that was spread by the leaders of the Jews because they were scared to death he was going to be raised from the dead. Remember? They put a guard on the tomb to try to ensure that wouldn't happen, that the body was stolen. There's all kinds of different theories that are going to be put out there trying to explain away the fact that that tomb was empty, brothers and sisters, that Jesus rose from the dead. So what I want us to do for a few minutes is just look at the facts of the matter, because I really believe that what we believe by faith, but we believe by faith and fact. Okay? Jesus did die on the cross. Evidence? How about the fact that Jesus is tortured before he's crucified? He is beaten. Soldiers, remember, beat him. Now, there's no reason, folks, to believe they held back. No reason to believe they kind of slapped him around a little bit. I believe there's every reason to believe by the time they were done with him, his eyes were black and his face was bruised and bloody and his nose probably broken. These guys beat on him because they have a license to do that. There's nothing to hold them back, nothing to keep them from working him over as hard as they want to. He then is flogged. Remember John 19 verse 1. And this is not just a whipping. This is the use of what would amount to a cat of nine tails. This has long leather thong strips. Embedded in those strips are pieces of metal or glass or rock, to where when it hits, it rips. By the time they're done, probably you can see Jesus' bones, see his ribs, as they strip the skin off his back. He has a crown of thorns pressed into his head. For the last several weeks, there's been a slide up on the screen during communion, if you've noticed, and it has a crown of thorns on it. And I think that's a very accurate representation of the crown of thorns. This is not sandburrs, brothers and sisters. This is thorns. These things are 1.5 inches long, needle sharp at one end. You can imagine, I can't imagine what it must feel like to have that pressed into your head and then beat on once it's pressed into your head. Is he tortured before he's crucified? He absolutely is. Is that right there enough to kill a lot of people? Yes, it is. Jesus then is forced to endure the agony of the cross. Nails are driven into his hands and his feet. And I don't know that nails is necessary. I mean, it's an accurate translation. I don't know it's representative of what's really going on. These are not nails. If you've ever seen pictures of the spikes, and that's a better word to use, of the spikes that they used in the crucifixion, that's a more accurate representation of what's going on. It's not like a 16-penny nail, and probably it goes through here, not here, but here, because this was considered hand too, and this would hold. But what's driven in there is a spike, okay? A spike in each arm and a spike into his feet. His shoulders will become dislocated. Psalm 22:14, all my bones are out of joint. And there's every reason to believe that as he hangs on the cross and as his weight is borne by his wrist, his hands, and then he slumps and shoulders, over time those shoulders would become dislocated. If you've ever dislocated your shoulder, you know what agony that is. Imagine what he's going through with that. And he's going to find himself slowly asphyxiating. We'll talk more about that in just a second. The word excruciating, by the way, literally means out of the cross. When you want to describe the most horrible pain that a person can undergo, one of the words that we'll choose is she was in excruciating pain. And that tells you all you need to know about how awful that pain was. I mean, you're talking 10 out of 10, aren't you? Excruciate, out of the cross. That's where that word comes from, the experience of those who died on the cross. His cause of death, here's a technical description. Asphyxiation leading to respiratory acidosis and resultant cardiac arrest. In other words, what happens is, as he hangs on the cross, he slumps, his diaphragm compresses, and he cannot breathe out unless he pushes up. Well, what are you going to push up on? You're going to push up on those nails in your feet and in your wrists. Is it worth the pain to push up? But if you don't push up, you can't breathe out. If you can't breathe out, you can't get rid of the carbon dioxide. And it's going to build up to a lethal level, and it's going to kill you. And that's what happens. That's why people die on the cross. It's not necessarily from blood loss. They literally die because the carbon dioxide builds up in the system to the point it becomes lethal. Proof of death, pericardial and pleural effusion. There's a medical technical term for it. Blood and water pouring from the spear and wound in his side. John 19:34. And by the way, the Bear put together a beautiful slide presentation, but I'm sorry, the representation of that hole in his side is not accurate, brothers and sisters. It wasn't just this little cut. Thomas, we're going to talk more about this, could take his hand and put his hand in the hole in Jesus' side. That's what Jesus says. Take your hand and put it in the hole in my side. There was a huge gaping wound where that Roman spear went in. That Roman spear, the tip of that thing's probably 18 inches long and several inches across. If he had survived, and he hadn't, but if he had survived the crucifixion, he will not survive that spear thrust. There is no way. But he's already dead. Why? Medical proof. Blood and water. The bloods begin to separate. Okay? He is dead at that point. There's a soldier's testimony. The soldiers on site believe he's dead. Now these are the guys who are pros. That's what these guys do. They crucify people. Okay? They break the bones of the thieves on either side of Jesus, the bones in their legs, because that way, with that increased agony, they cannot push up, and quickly they'll die. All right? The carbon dioxide will build up, they'll die. That's called crurifragium. Okay? Crurifragium. Breaking the bones on the cross. Okay, crurifragium. Jesus does not experience crurifragium. They do not break his bones. Why? Because they see he's already dead. And these guys know that he's already dead. So they break the bones of the thieves on either side. They do not break the bones of his legs. The centurion is going to certify to Pilate that Jesus is dead. Remember, when word comes to Pilate, Pilate says, no, not that quick. You understand he's on the cross 6 hours, but brothers and sisters, 6 hours is going to seem like eternity. But for somebody that's crucified, that's relatively quick death. The people would live on the cross sometimes for a day or two. Okay? And so 6 hours is quick. So Pilate wants to know, is he really dead? Is a centurion going to lie to him? Is a centurion going to put his life on the line? Is he going to make something up? Absolutely not. If he sends certification that he's dead, it's because he's dead. Okay? The tomb was empty. When those women came, the tomb was empty. Jesus is buried in the tomb of Joseph of Arimathea. Multiple passages. Matthew 27, 57 through 61, Mark 15, 42 through 47, Luke 23, 50 through 56, John 19, 38 through 42, all testifying to the fact that he is taken to a garden nearby where there is a tomb described as a rich man's tomb. The man's identified as Joseph of Arimathea, and his body is placed in that tomb. Isaiah had prophesied, by the way, 700 years before, quote, he was assigned a grave with the wicked and with the rich in his death. That's out of Isaiah 53, verse 9. You have people say today, well, Jesus could read Old Testament prophecies. He knew what those prophecies said about Messiah, and so he's going to try to fulfill in his life as many of those as he can. All well and good. I don't agree with that, but this makes that ridiculous because Jesus is dead. How's he going to control where his body is placed? And in his tomb, his body is placed. And it's not accidental, by the way, that in Acts chapter 8, when that Ethiopian eunuch is riding along in that chariot, he just happens to have the scroll open to Isaiah 53 so that Philip can preach to him Jesus, a resurrected Jesus. Okay? Now, a number of the women in attendance at the crucifixion watch to see where he was buried, because I've heard people postulate, well, the women got mixed up, they went to the wrong tomb. Really? I mean, come on, that's really a stretch. A whole group of women follow and watch so they can go back and they can't figure out where the tomb was. It's not like this was a graveyard, brother. This is a garden. Okay, it's not like there's a zillion tombs out there like at the National Cemetery. This is a garden, and in the garden there happens to be a tomb. They see where the body is placed. A guard is placed on the tomb. Matthew makes it very clear that the authorities go out of their way to ensure that nobody is going to steal the body out of that tomb. They even seal it, okay, as well as place a guard on it to make sure that it's not going to be bothered with. But when the women come early on Sunday morning, that tomb is empty. Okay, the body is not there. And all of the Gospels attest to that. Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection is not a matter of just faith, okay? It is a matter of history. You believe in the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Well, that's a matter of faith. Yeah, but it's a matter of fact too. I can be just as sure that Jesus was raised from the dead based on the testimony as I can that Lincoln was shot by John Wilkes Booth. Okay? That's a historical fact. Jesus' crucifixion and resurrection is an attested historical fact. And so our faith is based in fact. His resurrection from the dead is attested to by multiple witnesses. It's not like just a few people happened to see him. Think about the post-resurrection eyewitnesses, the two men on the road to Emmaus that Jesus will walk along with and visit with. And it's when it finally sits down and has a meal with them and their eyes are open, they go, oh, we just saw Jesus. And remembered men, they'll rush back to tell the apostles they had seen the resurrected Lord. Mary Magdalene, as beautifully illustrated in that video, she sees Jesus in the garden. Thomas and the apostles, in John chapter 20, verses 21 through 29, Jesus will appear in the room and appear to him. And I want to read that for you. Listen to this particular account. Now Thomas, one of the 12, called the twin, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, we've seen the Lord. But he said to them, unless I see in his hands the mark of the nails, and place my finger into the mark of the nails, and place my hand in his side, I will never believe. 8 days later, his disciples were inside again, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were locked, Jesus came and stood among them and said, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, put your finger here and see my hands, and put out your hand and place it in my side. Do not disbelieve, but believe. Thomas answered him, my Lord and my God. Jesus said to him, have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have believed. That's why we're here, okay? We didn't get to see literally the holes in his hands and the hole in his side, but we get to read about it and the attestation of those who did. There is a beautiful, beautiful poem that Rob Wallace shared with me a couple of years ago, given to him by a friend of his. This was penned by Thomas Troger back in 1984. And this is just, I love poetry, okay? But some poetry is sublime. And to me, this is a sublime representation of what happened in that room. It's very short. I just want you to listen to what he says. These things did Thomas hold for real. The warmth of blood, the chill of steel, the grain of wood, the heft of stone, the last frail twitch of blood and bone. His brittle certainties denied that one could live when one had died, until his fingers read like braille the markings of the spear and nail. May we, O God, by grace believe, and in believing still receive the Christ who held his raw palms out and beckoned Thomas from his doubt. Brothers and sisters, Jesus rose from the dead. Even one of his own apostles who was willing to go die with him. Go back, read John chapter 11. It's Thomas who says, I'll go with you, I'll die with you. Thomas, The built-in doubter says, if I can't see it, I ain't going to believe it. And he saw it. And he said, my Lord and my God. More than 500 people at once, according to 1 Corinthians 15, verse 6, saw Jesus raised from the dead. We don't know what the circumstances were. We don't know where he was when that took place. But Paul writes it down as fact that at one point, more than 500 people saw him at once. You don't fake out 500 people like that. They saw the resurrected Lord. Now, what does this mean to you and me? The best way I can sum up is listen to Jesus in John 14, 1 through 3. Let not your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go and prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, there you may be also. He's telling the apostles, guys, it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. I'm going to live. And I'm going to come back and take you to a place that I've prepared for you. Blessed, remember the words of Thomas, blessed are those who haven't seen and yet believe. Conclude with this passage. 1 Corinthians 15, verse 58. Therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know that your labor in the Lord is not in vain. And that statement, if you'll go back and read the larger context, is rooted in Paul's discussion of Jesus' resurrection from the dead. We can know what awaits us. We can have confidence in tomorrow and next year and 1,000 and 1,000,000 years from now, because we know the Lord, the resurrected Jesus. This morning, if you're ready to give your life to him and you haven't done that, and make that commitment by being buried with him in baptism, if we can share with you in prayer, help you in any way, won't you come while we stand and while we sing?
Just as I am without one plea, but that thy blood was shed for me, and that thou bidst me come to thee, O Lamb of God, I come, just as I am, thy love unknown has broken every barrier down. Now to thee I, yea, thine alone, O Lamb of God, I come. Listen, please.